Welcome back. This is another installment of DIY recording for educators. And if you've seen my last videos, you can already tell that this is going to be something a little different than the previous ones because everything is black. Why is that? Well, today we're going to be talking about something called a lightboard and how you can use the setup that I've outlined in my previous videos to create sort of a similar effect. Now, a lightboard is this is what a light board looks like, and it's essentially a pane of glass that you can write on with a camera on the opposite side to create educational videos using this cool floating text effect. So like I said, it's a pane of glass. It has some special lighting that lights up the marker that he's using on the glass. You know, you can erase it, you can draw on it, you can create this really cool effect. It kind of looks like he's teaching in the void a little bit. But it's a way for instructors to, still be able to write on a board as they're familiar with probably in class, but still be facing the camera. Because when you're usually writing on a board, you're facing away, and you don't really want to be doing that in video. You want to keep your attention focused towards the camera. So this is a really cool way of getting the best of both worlds with this really nice effect. The thing about a light board, though, is that it's fairly expensive. You need some good lights, you need a specific kind of glass, you need a studio space with a black backdrop, and if you want to be able to incorporate slides on the glass as well, which some versions do, you need some sort of mixer that's going to project onto the glass as well. So really, really cool setup. Not necessarily ideal for someone who's looking for a more budget studio, or who's trying to do this in their home or in a much smaller space. But we with this setup, which I've detailed before, you can go back and watch those videos and figure out exactly what I'm using and how I'm using it. Probably one of the most important things to use for this setup is the green screen, because it allows superimposition of my image onto the black background here. But you can use this setup for something very similar in function. It definitely does not look as cool, but like I said, if you have a lot less space and a lot less funds and fewer resources to do this kind of thing, this is a pretty okay alternative. This is just a black background PowerPoint presentation. You don't have to use a PowerPoint, you can just use a black picture. Or black desktop. The way that I'm going to demonstrate this is by talking about 35mm film, and something that a lot of people don't know about 35mm film is there's actually a bunch of different kinds. Not a bunch, there's mainly 3 different kinds. And this goes back to my days scanning film. This was my first job out of college. I took 35mm film and 16mm film, put it up on a big machine, and it would digitize every single frame. And in that way, we were able to get film into, color grading, visual effects, titles, and final delivery. So it was a way of digitizing analog film. So I should also mention that I'm not using PowerPoint's built-in annotation feature. I'm actually using a software called EpicPen, which I detailed back in a previous video. It's an annotation software that allows you to annotate on anything on your desktop. It doesn't have to be PowerPoint. It can be a video, it can be a picture, it can be anywhere. So it's a bit separate from the built-in PowerPoint feature, but if you want to use PowerPoint, then that will work as well. So what are perfs? Well, perfs is short for perforations. And in 35mm film, I probably don't have to tell you what a 35mm film strip looks like. It looks something like this, where you have a strip of film and it has some holes on the side. Now these holes are what are called perforations. And these are what allow the film to be moved inside a camera or inside a film scanner, because each piece of equipment has a little sprocket or a little pin that pushes these holes forward or backward or however. But these holes are called perforations. And I'm going to extend this a little because I'm going to need to. Sorry, this is slanted. My Wacom's kind of off at an angle. But there are actually 3 different kinds of 35mm film that you can shoot with. There's 4-perf, 3-perf, and 2-perf. And they are exactly as they sound. So 4-perf is a type of 35mm film where your image takes up 4 perforations. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this goes, down and down and down. So this produces kind of a box, more of a boxy frame, closer to a 4x3. It's not quite 4x3, but it's sort of what we call full frame. Then there's, of course, 3-perf film, 35mm. Don't get confused because I'm drawing all of these on the same strip of film. It's actually, if this were 4-perf film, this would be 4, and then 4, and then 4, and all the way down. You don't get mixed perf films. This is just for demonstration purposes, so they're all on the same strip of film. But 3-perf is exactly like it sounds. It's 35mm film where your picture area takes up 3 perforations. 1, 2, 3. And then you would go 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and all the way down. And this produces more of a wide frame, like you traditionally see. Maybe I should draw these a bit better. So this is sort of the shape of a 4-perf full frame. This is the shape of a 3-perf full frame. This is closer to 178 or 16:9. This is closer to 4:3. And then last we have 2-perf, which is closer to traditional widescreen. And as the name implies, it's a 35mm film where your image only takes up 2 perforations of space. And 2, 2, 2, 2. So this is going to be more like that. My proportions are not correct here, but you sort of get the idea of what each kind of 35mm film is doing. You get a different aspect ratio for each kind of film, and I've handled all kinds. So those are the main kinds of 35mm film, and that was my demonstration of how you can use this setup similar to a lightboard if you have to diagram, if you have to draw, if you have to write to some degree. We'll talk about that. And that was using that software called EpicPen. Now, there are certain pros to using this system rather than a traditional lightboard. It's much less expensive. With a traditional lightboard, you need at least a couple $1,000s probably. You need a special kind of glass. You need a frame for it. You need special markers. You need special lights that shoot into the glass. It's kind of a double-sided pain. You need a nice smooth black backdrop. You need good lights so that you get good separation of your subject from the black. You need good erasers, and you need people to set that kind of thing up. Most likely video people or engineers or, whomever. So because of that, you do need some kind of buy-in generally from an organization that wants to create this. You don't, unless you're, super DIY, go for it, make it, put it in your apartment. But for most people, it's not going to be that accessible construction. You can buy ready-made lightboards. That Northwestern link has links to a bunch of places where you can just buy them outright and have them shipped. But, it is a few $1,000s. And if you'll recall, this entire setup that I have here was about, well, okay, so let's include the Wacom in this because the Wacom is essential. That's the drawing tablet I have. The Wacom was roughly $250. So all told, the rest of the equipment was $466 plus $225. You do the math. I'm not a math major. I'm a video person. We don't do math. You can record video and slides and annotations separately. This is not how I'm currently using this setup. I'm actually recording them both at the same time, and they're both in, my video frame is embedded, with my annotations, so I can't really separate them later. But with this setup, you could theoretically record both streams separately and then add them together later. That's really handy if you want to be able to change the slides that you're using or make any corrections. It's especially helpful in editing. If you make a mistake, then you can just sort of cut it out, and you can hide the cuts really well if your two video streams are separate. You can do all that kind of stuff. If you have a typo in your PowerPoint, you can just make a new PowerPoint and export a new slide, and then you're pretty much good to go. Requires less space and lighting. So as I outlined before, Lightboard is a pretty space and lighting intensive system. Good quality produces good quality videos, but not everybody has access to that kind of quality lighting and that amount of space. You definitely need a dedicated studio space for that kind of thing. And you want some semblance of professional lighting. Right now my lighting is not that professional. It's a couple of plastic lamps on wooden dowels and C-clamps to clamp them to my desk. You are not going to get away with that if you're trying to use a Lightboard. So that's why this setup is a bit better, and no erasing needed. That's the other thing about the Lightboard, is if you want to use it like a traditional whiteboard where you can erase, you will generally have to stop the camera, erase the board, start the camera again, continue. I think the way to use Lightboards is probably better suited for if you just want to use it once throughout your entire video, not necessarily using it as a way to replace slides that you switch one after the other in the same video, because that's going to be a lot of stopping and a lot of erasing. Generally I think it's good if you're trying to diagram like a lighting situation or a molecule or, something that you're just going to keep up on the board for the entire time. You don't want your videos to be that long anyway, so it's, not out of the realm of possibility. But, with this, all I had to do was hit a button and all my stuff is cleared. So, in terms of efficiency, I think this, doing it this way is, a bit more budget friendly, a bit more economical about your space and about your time, and about what resources you have. The cons of this, using this system as an alternative to a Lightboard, your drawing and writing is less natural. I mean, you sort of remember what it looked like when I wrote 35mm. It's not that neat. I don't have great handwriting to begin with. You're not going to be able to draw great shapes. If depending on how your tablet is mapped, you might have, some weird slants and lines and whatever. I think it just takes some practice, but it's definitely not the same as writing on a whiteboard or a chalkboard. And this is something that's important when you're, in my previous video, I was talking about leaning into your strengths and leaning into your comfort zone. If you're somebody who prefers to write on a whiteboard or a chalkboard, and if that really, really impacts your ability to teach, then you're going to want to take that into account, because the only way you're going to stick with the process is to, come up with a process that you can live with comfortably and that you're going to, keep going back to. You don't want to start something that is just going to be so uncomfortable for you and so unnatural for you that you're not going to want to keep doing it and doing it and doing it. The thing about creating online educational content is you need consistency, and you need to be, consistently producing. So with this setup, if you're more inclined to be standing, especially, you could stand with this setup. The reason I have it down here is because my desk is down here. But in theory, if this were a higher desk, I could definitely be standing and I could be taking up all this space here. And then the proportions would be a bit nicer and I wouldn't just be in the corner. But if that's not an option for you, if you prefer to stand, if you prefer to write, but you still want to be looking at the camera, then the Lightboard is definitely a better way to go, if you can get it. And the other con, of course, is that this setup definitely lacks the cool factor. It's not cool. It's, I don't know, a little boring to watch. It's really cool to look at Lightboard text effects, and it makes the videos fairly dynamic looking. Although that is in some ways dependent on who's talking and who's producing the content. You can have a very charismatic person in this setup, and it would be just as cool and just as dynamic and just as interesting as someone who's using a Lightboard, but who perhaps is a bit less charismatic on camera. And charisma in the classroom does not really translate to charisma on screen. That's just how it is. Cameras do strange things to people. But it always gets better with practice. Always, always, always. Which is why consistency is key. You're going to hear me repeat a lot of these concepts. But consistency is key. Charisma is important in video production. And, cool text effects are really, really cool. But if you don't have the budget or the space or the time to set that kind of thing up, then this is a viable alternative. As always, thanks for watching, and if you have questions, comments, or ideas, michelle.ambrews@gmail.com, or leave a comment on this video. If you have something that you want me to talk about, let me know, because I'm looking for more topics. I think my next one is probably going to be on accessibility in creating video content, because you always want to, similar to how we were talking about creating space for subtitles, you want to deal with those contingencies of people who are going to be watching with subtitles, people who are going to be colorblind, people who are, have any range of disabilities. So we'll get into that probably next time. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.